Welcome to this week's Facebook Live. A few minutes later than usual, but bit of a rush of a day. Let's put it that way. So let's get into it. I wrote a blog earlier in the week about imposter syndrome that went up on Monday, and as usual, I do the Facebook Live on a Friday. So let's get into it and let's talk about imposter syndrome. What is it? So you might have heard of it, but you mightn't have paid too much attention to it unless you actually realize you suffer from it. Because a lot of people don't realize that that's what's going on for them. So it's important that we, as always, awareness is always our first step. So this term came about in the 1970s. There were, two psychologists who coined the phrase imposter syndrome. And there's been lots of studies on this condition, and it is disproportionately high in high achieving people, not just women. I know an awful lot of women do suffer from it, but men can suffer from this too. A lot of these people will find it difficult to accept their accomplishments. And it's been defined as, doubting your own abilities and feeling like a fraud. I think anybody that can recognize that you feel like a fraud will recognize, yeah, I could possibly have imposter syndrome. But we all doubt ourselves every day. There are times in the day or in the week that you might say, oh, I didn't get that right, or you might knock yourself down. We have some negative self-talk that'll come out. Doesn't necessarily mean you've got imposter syndrome. It's when it continues, this whole idea of doubting your abilities, feeling like a fraud. If it's really continuing on a daily basis and it starts to interfere in your life and your work, that's when you probably have imposter syndrome. And the first thing I'll say to you is you do need support from somebody like me. Common signs of imposter syndrome. First off, although there's been a huge amount of investigation into this, psychological studies have been done into it. It actually isn't in the DSM-5. It's not a recognised condition in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. But that changes. They do change, so it could be updated when they feel they have enough studies that they can finally put that in. So I wouldn't be worried about it because it is recognised by psychologists as something that people get. In fact, about 70% of the population, do get it at least once in their lifetime. So you're not alone. And the common symptoms or signs, as I said, you're unable to realistically assess your competence and skill levels. You'll never accept that your own successes are yours. That you'll credit these to an external factor. It's all down to luck. Always only there at the right time. You won't actually credit to your hard work. You won't credit it to your credentials and your actual experience, particularly around work. You'll disregard compliments and people congratulating you. Procrastination and perfectionism are high here too. Questioning everything you do. So again, tying into the procrastination and perfectionism. You're constantly finding fault with your performance. Again, tying in with the perfectionism. You've a fear that you just won't live up to expectations. But the thing is, you won't question whose expectations they are. Whose expectations is this? Is it an actual realistic expectation, whether it's somebody else's or your own? Is this actually a realistic expectation? Constantly overachieving, constantly over preparing, self-sabotaging. Definitely if you're procrastinating, you're self-sabotaging. I've talked about this before. Self-doubt and a fear of being found out. Setting yourself up for failure by setting unrealistic goals and then berating yourself for failing. So instead of breaking your goals down into manageable steps, they'll be too big. Sorry. high levels of anxiety, of course, and negative thinking cycles. I mean, that all ties in what we're talking about here. Um, and this going down to a core belief, and I've done a video on the core beliefs before and how important it is to try and identify it and identify, that thinking pattern, and thus identifying the emotions and the behaviors and your physical responses in turn to those core behaviors. But in this case, it's a lot of the time it is tied into the good enough. We're not good enough in some way. So we really have to identify those. But as always, we will look at common causes of what causes imposter syndrome. How did I get this? How did I get where I am now? Well, many factors can contribute to where to you having imposter syndrome. If this is you recognizing it, it can be, as I said, it's high levels of anxiety. Generally, social anxiety. So it could be connected to your social anxiety, family, could be somebody else in your family, personality, life changes, something changes, maybe you lost your job, your marriage dissolved, other lifestyle changes, any kind of a lifestyle change can then bring this up along with the anxiety. There are types of imposter syndrome. I'm not going to go into them in detail, but they might give you a clue as to the root of where your type of imposter syndrome came from. So the perfectionist is one type of imposter syndrome. The superhero, have to be the rescuer, superhero. The expert, always being an expert there. The natural genius, they can be prone to imposter syndrome as well. And the soloist, having to do it all on your own. So it's important that you recognize that those types, because then you can help narrow it down. And when we, narrow it down, this is when we can start helping ourselves. So the first thing we would always do, and I always say it to you, is pick the first A, and that's awareness. If we're not aware, we can't change it. And as I said, sometimes we might have a perfectionist streak, or we might say, yeah, I procrastinate. But is it tied in with imposter syndrome? Is there elements of that in there for me too? And then, being willing to admit that, okay, maybe I do have imposter syndrome, and, it's reared its ugly head for me, and I need to ask myself some serious questions here, to find out what's going on for me. And I've put these in the blog, so you don't have to make a note of them now. You can just go check out the blog. I'll leave a description in the link below. So questions you could start with: can I recognize any of the symptoms that I've listed? They're also listed in the blog, so you can check those out. In what way has imposter syndrome affected my life? So look at all the areas. I expand on that question a bit in the blog, so do check that out. Any area though you can think of, how is it affecting or impacting my life? In what areas do I play it small? An awful lot of times when we have imposter syndrome, we will play it small in maybe not in at home, but maybe we're doing it just in work, or vice versa. So we've got to really say, am I playing it small in a particular area of my life? Can I recognize any negative thinking and core beliefs that I have about myself? Again, as I said, they can be tied in. The negative thinking cycles will kick off in your head when you have imposter syndrome, and that core belief, particularly around not being good enough, feeling I'm not good enough. That's important to see. Is that one of your core beliefs? But there can be others, so checking those out. Do I overthink my work? Again, over preparedness. Setting unrealistic goals. So presentations, projects, what am I doing? Even work at home. Does the house always have to be immaculate? You've got to look at it. Am I being too much of a perfectionist there? Am I failing to recognize my own achievements and successes? That's really key. Do I feel highly sensitive to constructive criticism? Another one you might want to look at. Do I agonize over even small small errors in work or at home? Again, coming into the perfectionist part of it there. And again, if we're prone to that too, we can cycle into procrastination and we just won't do it. We just won't do whatever it is. Changing and challenging your core beliefs is going to be at the heart of this issue. And it's hard to change these on your own. So again, I'm going to reiterate this. You need to actually, look for support. And getting support, once you're aware, once you've asked yourself those questions, now it's time, I have to reach out for support. So this is one of the key ways that you're going to be helping yourself, is to reach out for support. You'll need plenty of support to overcome that. You're going to need to be able to work with a therapist to overcome the thinking around this condition. But you also need a good positive support system, and I can't emphasize this enough. It's a key one here. Who's in your support system? Who's supporting you? But also, what's your environment? And those, you're not just those you spend your time around, but where are you spending your time? How is it influencing how you feel about yourself, how you're thinking about yourself? Become more observant. So it's a little bit of self-help maybe while you're waiting to see a therapist, but just to become more observant of, what's my environment like? Who am I actually spending time with? Become observant of the things, of places, of people that are surrounding you, and how they're influencing how you feel, how you behave, how you think. The other thing is, most of the time we won't actually talk about how we're feeling. Even to the closest person, that we have. We won't bring up this idea of imposter syndrome. And as a result then, this condition does tend to isolate you. Even, and I've talked about this feeling alone, even in a relationship last time, I think it was last week I did that video. But, we have a tendency to get isolated by this condition too. And we don't talk about that either. And it's important that we recognise we're not alone. As I said, about 70% of people actually can get this condition, imposter syndrome, at some point in their life. So that's a huge amount of the population. So, reaching out to positive, and that's the key, it's positive support people and your therapy. And when we reach out and we actually start to talk about it, you might be surprised to learn, like, other people actually feel like that. And, you're not alone here. Talking with positive supporters is going to be vital. Having them there for you is going to help with that feeling of, and it also stops the isolation and the loneliness from keeping you trapped. Remember that, just like other mental health conditions, it likes to keep you trapped and alone and isolated, because then, the thinking can keep going. It's feeding you, it's feeding that negative cycle. What we keep hidden only allows it to fester within ourselves more and more. Stop fighting your feelings as well. It's okay to admit to yourself, and again, hopefully to your therapist, but also to these positive supporters, because if they're positive, and I've talked about a positive support team before, and it's quite a broad range of people, that, admitting that things aren't going so well for you right now, you just don't feel that things are going well, you can't recognize the good you have in your life. This can bring it into light. This helps to bring it into the light. And again, it's bringing awareness to it, but also acceptance. This is where I'm here. This is where I'm at right now, and that's okay. It allows us to take the steps that we need to make the changes, particularly around our core beliefs, and they are at the heart of the imposter syndrome. Another tip I would say to you is, and part of your negative thinking would be to stop the comparison game. And it's about what I'm consuming, what am I allowing surround me, who am I allowed to feed me with information, and this comparison game is a barrier to loving yourself, to your self-care. It's a trap. It's actually a trap. And you really do need self-love and self-care to help you overcome imposter syndrome. And it is so easy, I think, particularly nowadays, to fall into the comparison trap, because we're so open to social media in particular. I don't like harping on about social media, but even the media in general. But also, who are we surrounding ourselves with? What are they saying to us? We have to watch all that. So, the if we fall into this comparison trap, it keeps us comparing and thinking that someone else knows better than we do, is better than we are, but we're not. They're not. Um, it really, when we stop doing it, we need to start bringing out those inner negative thoughts and negative core beliefs. And that's why we need to stop the comparison trap, the comparison game trap. Um, the thing about comparisons and this comparison game, and it's a habit, it's actually a comparison habit. And as such, when we recognize, and again, it's about awareness, have I entered this game? Have I entered the game of comparisons? And when I can recognize that, then I can also realize that it's a habit. And when we do that now, I can change it. All habits can be changed. But we have to make up our mind that we're going to change it. Again, awareness. Okay, I do it. That's acceptance. Now I can do something about it. I'm going to make up my mind. I'm not entering into this anymore. And refusing to allow it to fuel, the comparisons and the imposter syndrome, because that's what it's doing. Comparison games always fuel the imposter syndrome. So be careful who you listen to. Be really discerning about who you're watching, who you're listening to, who you're talking to, what you're absorbing, even just in your environment around you. And, be more consistent in setting realistic goals as well. Because the comparison game tends to push us, drive us on to do more, drive us on to do more. But we need to take that self back and go, because it's about, self-love and self-care. Take the step back. Is this realistic? Consistent small steps. And if they're actionable small steps, then that will allow us to reach the goal that we want ultimately. Instead of allowing the comparison to push the perfectionist or the procrastinator and the imposter syndrome, which then sets us up for failure. So stepping out of that game is going to be very, very important. It's going to be vital, in fact. And tying into that, sorry, I'll just move a little bit. Tying into that then is the social media moderation. So use social media moderation. I've talked about it before. It can be bad for your mental health. Everything in moderation. And as I said, it'll tie in nicely with the comparison game. It's not just social media, of course, that drives the comparison game. People you're with, as I said, the environment you're in. But it's the constant bombardment of images and language that promote the negative self-image and the comparison game. That's what we have to try and limit. We have to try and put the brakes on it and, at least limit. And I've talked about this before. I know it's hard for it to just go cold turkey and it's unrealistic. So press the brakes, go a little bit slower, and balance it out with more positive things in your life. So again, this is where your positive supporters come in, making more time for them instead of being on the phone all the time, actually having an interaction, a face-to-face interaction with people, getting out for a short walk, meditation, anything at all on that self-care list or more. And I've talked about lots of things you can do for yourself, particularly if you're stressed, and imposter syndrome will make you stressed. I did a whole series at the beginning of the year, I think, on stress and how all the different things you can do to help yourself. So go check out those videos. Again, in general, it's about being discerning. Who am I listening to? Who am I watching? Who or what am I consuming? And who am I spending time with? Or what am I spending time with? What things are in my environment as well? So think about, what can you do to balance it out? Hit the brakes on the social media, and do things that you bring you joy, or bring back the joy into your life. Because bringing that joy back into your life, doing things that you enjoy, and taking the time for yourself, again, self love, self care. Um, this helps with the recovery of imposter syndrome, and that's very important. Um, Difficult one, the next tip, because this is what people with imposter syndrome do not like to do, and that is celebrate themselves. You have to celebrate yourself. It is important that you start to recognize your talents, your achievements, any blessings that you have, and it doesn't matter how small they are. Because as I said, when we suffer from imposter syndrome, it's just like, that's gone. We don't even, no, next job, next job. We don't give ourselves time even to recognize I did a good job on that. Well done. We're not talking about big achievements, certificates, or anything like that. Just even a pat on the back at the end of the day, say, I got through the day. I did a good job. Um, we can pass off any praise or compliments that we get from other people as well. We don't acknowledge them. Just don't acknowledge anything like that. What we need to do, and it's a self-help tool that you can use, without a therapist, is to, celebrate your own uniqueness, celebrate your blessings, celebrate your talents, your achievements, and do it every day. It doesn't have to be a big long list. It can be one or two things. You can stick them in a compliments jar. You just get a glass jar, a recycled glass jar, and put them in it. Write them on a piece of paper. I'm sure you have, like me, you have some of these floating around the house. Write down whatever it is. Did you receive a compliment? Write down that compliment. Did you do something today? Was there something you've achieved? Did you get the project finished? Did you get to the halfway point in the project? Whatever it is, write it down. Put it down. Um, you know, Put that down, put it in the compliments jar, or write it in a journal where you can look at it. Look at your win of the day. You can think about it in those terms. If you don't want to, start writing down all your achievements, you might feel uncomfortable doing that at the start. But just one small win of the day can be enough to get us started on this. And keep them. Keep them somewhere you can go back to them and reread them when you're having a bad day. The other thing I'd say to you is, when you start to get compliments, or when you start to recognize that you're actually getting compliments, just a simple thank you. You're not allowed to say, oh, but only. Oh, that was nothing. You're not allowed, you could just have to say thank you. That's the only thing you're allowed to say, is the words thank you. Um, you need to start reclaiming your power over the imposter syndrome. That's what you're doing with these. Um, don't forget rewards and treats. I've talked about these before. Putting that in place, a rewards and treat system. Putting in place a gratitude list is also another one. Visualizations and affirmations are all good ones for this, to help you start celebrating yourself, and as I said, reclaiming the power over the imposter syndrome. And that's important. And lastly, remember you're not alone. This is about taking consistent, actionable baby steps that'll help you with your recovery. Because your goal is recovery from imposter syndrome if you feel you're suffering from it. And as always, it's about progress, not perfection. Because the perfectionist will rear its ugly head. So you got to keep, no, we're doing this. We're going to keep going here. We're going to take it down to small, consistent baby steps. And remember to reward yourself for taking those steps. Small treats, something you enjoy. It doesn't have to cost any money. It's all about celebrating you and building back up your confidence, because your confidence will definitely have been knocked by imposter syndrome. So please, start to raise it up again. So I'll leave it there. I hope this has helped. As always, I'm very happy to answer questions if you have any. And the other thing to say to you is thank you all for watching. Those that watch live and those that watch in replay here and on YouTube, thank you very much for doing that. The other thing I'd say to you is I'm taking a break next week. We have a bank holiday here. It's June in case you're watching in replay. It's the June bank holiday here in Ireland, so we're taking a break on Monday, and I won't be on no blog, so there won't be a Facebook Live next Friday. Taking a little bit of a break for next week. And have a good week. Stay safe, and I will talk to you all then in 2 weeks' time.